this Sunday on Rosemary Barton Live.
Well, some say this is as good as it gets. We know the best is yet to come.
Strong mandate. Pierre Poilievre receives 87% support in his leadership review. But what does he need to do to get Canadians behind him? Conservative MPs Poilievre Majumdar and Michael Barrett are here.
One of the biggest criminals who's running a multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprise.
National security. The RCMP on the arrest of Canadian fugitive Ryan Wedding and how the National Police Force is strengthening the border. My one-on-one interview with RCMP Commissioner Mike Duhem.
Since Trump dislikes Minnesota so bad and we're so out of control, let's join Canada.
Call to Canada. Amid a deadly immigration crackdown in Minneapolis, a former U.S. governor suggests his state become a province. Former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura is here. It all starts now on Rosemary Barton Live. Hey, thanks for joining us on this Sunday. It's been a busy political weekend. Conservatives have given a resounding yes to Pierre Poilievre's leadership. Poilievre was facing a mandatory leadership review. He sailed through that with an endorsement of 87.4%. Those are the delegates supporting him to stay on as Conservative leader. That leadership review was held over the weekend in Calgary. Poilievre addressed the crowd moments before that voting started.
So why keep going? Because we want our kids to have the same promise that we had. Because we want them to know that when you care about something, you work for it. When you believe in something, you fight for it. And most of all, when you start something, you never give up.
This leadership review came after a rocky year for Poilievre, starting all the way back in April, of course, when the Conservatives lost the election, and Pierre Poilievre lost his own seat, and then more recently, when two of his MPs crossed the floor to join the Liberal Party. That happened before the holidays. Yesterday, while in Calgary, I spoke to Alberta Conservative MP Poilievre Majumdar and Ontario Conservative MP Michael Barrett. They were both at the convention in Calgary, where just hours earlier, Poilievre received that strong endorsement. Joining me now, Michael Barrett and Poilievre Majumdar. Nice to see you both.
Good morning.
Okay, so how are we feeling this morning with this result in support of the leader, Michael?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
87.4. It's a good number. It's a good day to have a good day. This follows, of course, a speech from Mr. Poilievre that laid out his hopeful message, the hopeful message from Canada's Conservatives about what we want to see, and this is what not only have I heard talking to delegates from across Canada over this weekend, but the speech that Mr. Poilievre gave yesterday is a reflection of the feedback that he's heard through thousands, if not tens of thousands of conversations over the last year.
Okay, and I want to talk more about the speech and some things that he talked about or didn't talk about, but what did you make of the number?
Listen, this is a united, hopeful party. We've confirmed that. It's the largest convention in Canadian history. It's Calgary. I think that you felt the electricity that the leader was able to connect with in this room. It's certainly something, as Michael said, a result of thousands of conversations across the country. We know our movement is strong, hopeful, united, resolute. We have a leader that's a litigator and up to the job, and our party's endorsed that direction wholeheartedly. So I think stay humble, work hard is exactly what the leader would expect we do, and I'm energized by the result.
What has to happen now in Ottawa, inside caucus? Like, how does this translate into how you all approach your job and how Pierre Poilievre approaches his job, Michael?
Well, you look at some of the changes that you've seen since the last election. There's been legislation, government legislation, if not signature from Mr. Carney's government, that we saw was in the best interest of Canada. Now, at the time, we said with things like the One Canadian Economy Act that we would have done more so that we could go further faster, but we supported that legislation. The same is true with some tax cuts that they've made. We're supporting
bail you're going to move forward with quickly? Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's going to make our community safer. And this is so important because at this time we want to demonstrate that that we can work together on shared priorities when they reflect what Canadians are hoping from us.
And is that difficult to do sometimes, to show you can collaborate on the issues that matter to Conservatives while still holding the government to account on other issues?
When Liberal ministers gaslight you, it makes it a little more difficult. Let's be clear. It's not exactly that the Carney Liberals have been full partners in working together to get things done in this country. For a year now, they've had the support of Conservatives on all of these issues, and they're slow rolling it. I'm not sure if it's a matter of competence or capability, but I know that we are a voice for millions of people who are extremely desperate with food insecurity going through the roof. We've got, I hear it in my own riding. People have to take things out of their shopping cart just to be able to make ends meet. These are very serious, heady issues, and it requires a serious effort. And so I think, as recently as last week, we proposed a Sovereignty Act that would unlock our resources and have massive consequences for our country. I think the big ideas that we have been championing all along are the ones we'll keep proposing, because that's what we've been asked to do by the people who support us.
Okay, how do you put that? I agree all those issues matter to Canadians, polls show that too, but how do you put all of that inside the context of what the world is dealing with? Global upheaval, Donald Trump, threats of sovereignty against other nations, tariffs. Like, how do you work both of those? Because that's the piece that we didn't hear a lot about last night. A little bit, but not a lot.
Mr. Poilievre has been crystal clear, as have all members of our caucus, that we want Prime Minister Carney to get a good deal for Canada, and we want to help him get a good deal. Part of that means that we need to be negotiating from a position of strength. We've been expressing that we need to show that we have other customers, that we have new export markets, and Mr. Poilievre has talked about that, and he did address that about getting our natural resources to Tidewater is going to do a lot in that respect. And we heard him address the needed investment, massive investment in our Canadian forces, because that's part of being able to express our sovereignty. Yeah. And we've been clear that we'll work with Mr. Carney's government again to bolster our military, to get to new trade markets, to try and get a good deal for Canadian workers and Canadian families with the U.S. But again, as Shuv said, this is a two-way street, and we extend our hand to try and get some things done, and they need to work in that spirit of collaboration as well.
But is it hard, I guess, is my question, to criticize the government on its approach with Donald Trump, for instance, and not look like you are somehow undercutting the Prime Minister or hurting the country, or do you know what I mean? Like, how do you thread that needle as an opposition party? Because that seems challenging to me.
Well, Rosemary, we are a democracy in which constructive criticism and proactive proposals are welcome. Right. An act of criticizing the government is an act of loyalty to country to make sure we make the right decisions. And energetically so, you have a Prime Minister who has said that on one side, Donald Trump is a transformational president, and on the other side, Canada belongs in Beijing's New World Order. These are confusing signals to Canadians and to the world. The best way to build strength and sovereignty for our country are the things that Pierre Poilievre talked about last night, which was to unleash our resources, be our best customer, get our product to market, build up our national defense to go it alone if we have to.
There you are. You're criticizing the moves that he's made against China, but you both say that he needs to diversify trade. Why would you not go to China and try and find markets there?
The center of gravity of global growth for the next half century is the Indo-Pacific region. It involves billions of people and many countries, from Korea to Japan to Australia and others.
They're working all of those countries, but you seem...
But a new strategic partnership that's focusing on, and to Xi Jinping's face, describing him as an important leader in a new world order is a very dangerous thing to do at this time.
Okay, but you're not against him seeking those trade relations with China, are you?
Strategic management of China is, I think, the better approach for the government to take when it comes to China. Strategic partnership with TPP nations, Quad nations, partners in the region that actually share our values and our strength of supply chain security is obviously where we need to spend our time.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about national unity, because that was also something that came up in the speech. He alluded to Quebec, and he alluded to where we are in Alberta, obviously. previously. He blamed the Liberals for a lot of it, but it's any government's responsibility to hold the country together. How concerned are you about that and how the government is handling that, and then how you as Conservatives need to respond to those threats that are real, whether they're about to happen, I don't know, but they are real.
We need to take any threat of separation seriously, because we are stronger together as one country, and it's about respect. We need to make sure that we're respecting the province's areas of jurisdiction, making them, treating them as equal partners, and really, what we've seen is that when it's been inconvenient over the last 10 years, that the Liberal government has disregarded that this is a partnership. And what we've seen...
And you think that feeds into independence movements? That's your suggestion?
Well, absolutely. And people I'm not an Albertan.
No, nor am I. We'll ask him in a minute.
I'm not a Quebecer.
Yeah.
But what I've heard are genuine sentiments from people in those provinces and from those provinces, and it needs to be taken seriously. And what do they want? They want a fair deal. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you get told that your way of life is a thing of the past, and that you need to retool and keep it in the ground, for people who have very dirty hands but make clean money for everyone in this country, that's a very disrespectful approach. And so, are we seeing signals of a change from Mr. Carney? We've heard words. What we want to see is action, and that's what we deserve. And I think that would demonstrate the partnership that a lot of folks are looking for.
And that's certainly what the MOU, part of the intent behind the MOU that the government signed with Alberta, was to try and deal with some of the things that Michael's talking about. People in Alberta frustrated with the way they've been treated previously. What is your position on Alberta independence and how that should be dealt with inside the Conservative Party?
Western resentment is a result of having our industry and our workers being attacked systemically for a decade. Quebec separatism is a result of an imposed idea of post-national ideology, saying that our nation has no ideology, we have no identity, we have no place, no sense of history. It's not an accident of history that under Liberal rules, when you find Canada most disunited.
I don't know if that's true. You find referendums. Rule. I don't know if you see it.
Referendums is probably the most dangerous expression of getting close to the brink of losing the country, as it did under Chrétien.
The Bloc Québécois was formed under Brian Mulroney.
It was an aftermath of that result.
Anyway,
but
go on.
My point, though, is it was Stephen Harper over a decade ago that resolved these resentments and had a confederation that worked. Because, as Michael said, there was respect across the federation for how our country ought to be governed.
But as an Alberta MP...
I'm a proud Albertan who believes in a strong Canada, that this would never have been an issue had Liberals all along understood that we have something to contribute here, we have a stake in the future of our country, and we're keen to build. But if the country keeps turning its back, if federal government politicians keep stirring the hornet's nest with their policies and their bait and switches, then they're not doing a service to the unity of this country.
Quick 30 seconds to both of you. What do you want to see the leader do next?
This is about, again, what all Canadians want to see, actions following words. And Mr. Poilievre has committed to delivering results for Canadians. We talked about the Sovereignty Act. We talked about working with the government where it makes sense to get results for Canadians, getting a good deal for Canada with the U.S., trying to work with the Liberal government to achieve that. And so that's exactly what you're going to see from Conservatives when we get back to Ottawa, and we're going to do it while we're holding them to account. As Shuv said, it's an act of loyalty.
Last word to you.
I think we're going to be energetic in the spring. Michael has said it exactly right. We're here to be a constructive opposition. We want to get things done. The stakes are too high in this country for gamesmanship. And we've got a serious set of proposals that Pierre Poilievre laid forward before the party and the country yesterday. And we really sincerely hope that we can find a way to get those done.
Shuv, Michael, thank you both so much for being here. I'll see you back in Ottawa. Appreciate it.
Safe travels.
See you.
Thank you.
Lovely time in Calgary. They've got all the good weather in case you're looking for it. As national security concerns evolve in 2026, how is law enforcement meeting those challenges? My one-on-one with the RCMP Commissioner, Mike Duhem, is next. From the arrest of Ryan Wedding to an extortion crisis, many are calling it, in parts of this country. I'm Rosemary Barton, and we're live. We're getting more information about the role Canada played in the arrest of Ryan Wedding, the former Olympian. That's all coming to light. U.S. authorities alerted the RCMP about the arrest of him. He's an Olympian turned drug kingpin, days before he was taken into U.S. custody in Mexico. The RCMP says it also had a number of members involved in key roles that led to that arrest. This comes as the RCMP is, like every other government department, managing budget cuts while looking to expand the force, and with some saying that there is an extortion crisis in parts of this country. I spoke about all of this with the Commissioner of the RCMP, Mike Duhem. Commissioner Mike Duhem joins me in studio. Nice to see you again, Commissioner.
Thanks for having me, Rosie.
Lots to talk about, but I want to start with sort of the big story. I think we were supposed to talk to you last week, and I looked up and I saw you were not in the country. Ryan Wedding was arrested on multiple charges related to murder and drug trafficking. It is a little bit unclear to me how things unfolded, and I'm not sure how much you're going to be able to say. There seems to be some confusion around whether he surrendered or whether he was taken in Mexico. What can you tell me about how that actually unfolded?
So I apologize for a last-minute change last time because it had to be the last minute. But you know what, Rosie? It's an interesting and complex international file where you see where the RCMP came together with the FBI, Colombians were involved, the Mexicans were involved, Department of the Justice Department, the FBI, I said, many law enforcement, Canadian law enforcement, U.S. law enforcement, and this was really it was a FBI lead, but we have some RCMP members that had played a key role in this investigation throughout the investigation, and considering that this was led by the FBI. The briefing I got was very little with how he was apprehended. Right. And out of respect to the FBI, I don't usually ask questions when it begins into these, I would say, special operations and how it's done, because it's not my file to speak.
Okay, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that essentially, the Mexican police alerted the FBI, and the FBI negotiated with him to give himself up to surrender. I don't know if that's the version.
Yeah, I don't have that information. Okay. I was told to be in Ontario, California at a certain time, and to be there for the arrival of.
Okay, so that's the other part I wanted to know. How much were you informed that they were on the verge of this? Because, as you said, you got to California pretty quickly.
It was really close hold. So I would say probably 3 days before flying out, I was informed just to be on standby and what was unfolding, and I appreciate the fact that we were able to be there to, you know what, I'd say of the history I have in the organization, probably one of the biggest criminals who's running a multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprise that that was arrested.
So just to conclude on this part of it, what does this mean for the charges against him? There are charges against him in Canada. Will he just stay in the United States? How will your involvement now continue? So
our involvement will continue with the file, but be mindful that as the investigation began, all the collection was based on U.S. judicial process. So we're going to go through the indictments, and you got to remember that the person's still in custody. So there's sometimes investigative steps that continue and see where that goes. But right now we're focused on the indictments in the United States, and then after that we'll see the next phase.
And has pleaded not guilty.
And has pleaded not guilty.
A year ago, the RCMP increased border staff by, I think, 35%. It was supposed to be temporary. Is it ongoing?
Yeah, no, it's we fill that up, but you got to remember, and when we got this $666 million from the government, is that we invested a lot in technology. So initially there was a huge push to put regular members or police officers on the front line, but as we're bringing in new technology, you can have different approach when you're enforcing between the ports of entry and being guided by technology or what you have. So
okay, so but the presence remains.
Presence
but it could go down if you.
The presence it could ebb and flow depending where we're at. But I look at the crossings between the ports of entry, especially in the province of Quebec. Yes. We've arrested more people this year because we have better technology on it. So and we work.
Yeah. And what is the technology? Drones, I imagine.
This is the aerial capability is something that we didn't have, so that's really profitable. With the aerial, with the Black Hawk helicopters, we've detected other areas where could be used for passage between the ports of entry. So it gave us a different perspective of the whole border. Are
we seeing more people at the border because, for instance, these ICE raids and other concerns that people are having?
I would look at, there's no really significant spike. Even if the United States are removing temporary protective status for certain individuals, we haven't really seen a notable spike on that.
But you have made more arrests.
We have made more arrests.
Or detained more people,
yeah. But our role is, you got to appreciate, Rosie, our role is if someone crosses between the ports of entry, we arrest the individual and bring him to CBSA who process the person. So, and again, technology, the increase in technology has played a huge role.
Okay. I want to ask you about the federal gun buyback program, which, as you know, there are provinces that are not interested in participating. Newfoundland says it's not going to participate. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the Northwest Territories, none of them plan to administer the program. How is this going to work if provinces aren't cooperating?
So you have to understand that the whole buyback program is driven by public safety. Yeah. Our role was Canadian Firearms Program was responsible to provide some of the data, some of the types of weapons that would go on the list. And we are also responsible to set up the collection of the weapons. So it would be to public safety to continue negotiating with the provinces to get to an agreement or a term or compensation with regards to the buybacks.
Is that disappointing to you that provinces are not willing to do this?
Well, it's. I'm not going to say I'm disappointed, but when you look at the totality, if we can get the types of assault-style firearms off the street, it's safer for everyone.
And what are you doing in terms of the weapon collection right now? Like how is that? So there's very few, I guess, happening. But
so the collection hasn't started just yet for the private citizen, for the civilian. Where the portal ends at the end of March, I believe, and then they're going to assess all the information that comes in, and from there, with our plans to collect the firearms, we're going to roll it up, and then the message will go to the owners of the assault-style firearms, and then the collection site will be determined.
Okay. I'm going through a lot of topics, so and I appreciate that you're willing to take them all. I do want to ask you about extortion. Yeah. The BC RCMP Assistant Commissioner, as you know, had to apologize for not being willing to, I guess, say that what was happening in British Columbia is in fact a crisis. The Mayor of Surrey is now demanding more action because she is very concerned about the cases of extortion in British Columbia. I know you met with Premier Eby while he was in town. What is the RCMP doing on this file to make people feel safe in their communities?
So you have to put things in perspective as to the whole question of extortion. Because right now, and you probably know this, Rosie, Lower Mainland BC and the Peel region where they had the summit as well, Edmonton and the Edmonton area as well. Based on the intelligence that I'm being given, these are local South Asian organized crime groups that are doing it. We don't have a transnational tentacle. Okay. So from a federal perspective, our federal mandate, we're there. We decide to provide additional resources to BC, but to look at really focusing, is there a transnational element? But the intel doesn't indicate that. British Columbia stepped up in having a task force with extortion. And the meeting I had with Minister Eby, as well as the minister the day before, was real to look at how can we help even more BC to tackle this crisis. And that's what we're doing. The province has agreed to commit more resources. And talking with my minister, we decided that we can provide some federal resources as well.
That's surprising to me that there's no transnational influence, because we have seen in the past, obviously, that these gangs inside Canada are influenced by what's happening in another country. So is that surprising, or do you think that they're influenced but there's no direct connection, I guess?
Well, from the briefings I received is right now there's nothing that demonstrates there's a transnational aspect. I'm not saying there's none at all, but in our holdings, and as we continue, because there's still some files that are being investigated, there's many files that are being investigated, it could have a transnational component, and that's where we're going to assist. And
so what is it that Canadians who are experiencing this fall victim to this? What is it that they should know?
I say the first thing you should do is as soon as you're a victim of extortion, at the very preliminary stage, is to contact your police. And that will give us, there's a lot of work going on in the 3 different areas to address it and to make people safe.
Is it as bad as the Premier and the Mayor of Surrey seem to think it is?
Well, so if you look in Lower Mainland, there was an increase at one point, and then it kind of quieted down, and then it picked up again. So putting the right resources, informing the people, that's one of the key things, and
talking about it.
Well, talking about it for sure. For sure,
The RCMP is tasked with cutting 2% of your budget. It's not like everybody else right now. You're having to make difficult choices. Have you sorted out where that 2% is going to come from? Because you're also trying to recruit people.
Yeah, so the RCMP was fortunate because it's only 2%. Other government departments, 15%. And 2% of my overall budget is about $92 or $93 million. We can trim that without affecting frontline policing, without affecting our recruiting and our administrative structure and the front line. So
you're not going to be in a case where you have to lay people off, obviously, because you want the opposite to happen.
Well, yeah, but we are in that comprehensive expenditure review, and we are assessing what needs to be done. And I'll be honest, Rosie, with any organization or government department, we grow, and eventually, it's time to trim some of the fat off. And I think that we are in a position where I think it's an opportunity for us to streamline some of the process and even refine the organization. When I say the organization, predominantly national headquarters and how we serve the divisions.
Commissioner, thank you for coming in, spending all that time with me, answering all those different questions. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rosie.
Pierre Poilievre gave a major speech on Friday night, followed by a vote to see if he would get the support from his own party, and he sure did.
His speech was very good. He touched a lot of points. He's got a good plan, to restore hope.
Poilievre can stay on as Conservative Party leader, but will the party's support translate to the broader Canadian public? How can he grow that part of his support for the next election? The Sunday Scrum is just ahead with all of that. You're watching RBL.
my message to those people who have felt unseen for too long, who are carrying the country on their back and feel underappreciated and overworked. Conservatives see you, and Conservatives will fight for you. Hope is on the way for our people as well. But hope is not just a comforting blanket. Hope is the knowledge that your work will fulfill your purpose.
Pierre Poilievre there speaking to delegates at the party convention over the weekend. The Conservative leader received a resounding 87.4% support to cement his leadership of the Conservative Party. Will this give Conservatives some new momentum? Will Poilievre be able to grow that support amongst Canadians? Let's bring back our Sunday Scrum. Stephanie Levitt's a senior reporter at the Globe and Mail. She is still in Calgary. Catherine Cullen is the host of CBC Radio's The House. She's back in Ottawa. And Rob Shaw is a political correspondent for Check News, and he joins us from Victoria. Good to see you all again. Catherine, I'm going to start with you. We talked a lot about the big number and how that was, a strong endorsement, gives Poilievre a strong mandate. What happens now? There is some momentum coming out of the convention. People seemed excited. But what does he have to do now to sort of keep that going?
He has a whole host of challenges. And we know that our colleague Olivia Stefanovich talked to the Conservative campaign manager, Steve Outhouse, after this number became public, so in the wee hours over the weekend. He talked about a number of things that they want to do in terms of their schedule, right? We know there's interest in town halls, going across the country, sort of trying to continue with this sense that there's enthusiasm. But the truth is Pierre Poilievre has a whole host of challenges, some of which he has some control over, many of which he does not. You, Rosie, in the reporting you were doing, the broadcasting you were doing over the weekend, talked to Jason Kenney, who said, really liked the speech. One thing it really needed was a direct acknowledgement of Trump, that this is a huge issue for Canadians. Every week there's a new threat that involves our sovereignty, our economy. We know that Mr. Poilievre is likely to have more to say on that topic, but it is difficult to even sometimes get in the conversation for him. There are other factors out there that make things challenging for him as well. The NDP, if that party continues to struggle, of course, they're in the midst of a leadership race right now. We don't know what their political fortunes look like, but without a stronger NDP, things are hard for the Conservatives as well. So he has a number of challenges that he's looking at right now. While Conservatives are really enthusiastic about him, a lot of people who might otherwise think about voting for the Conservatives are not necessarily so keen on him personally. So I think some of that hope conversation you were hearing there is part of their effort at trying to bring some of those people over, but it is going to be a battle, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost, the weekend obviously was a big hurdle to clear, and there wasn't much consternation that he wouldn't clear it, Steph, but there are a lot of hurdles to go to become Prime Minister, and it is a very difficult environment for any politician these days.
You know, Rosie, I stepped out to grab a cup of coffee in between our panels here, and I ran into a Conservative MP. And I said, so, how are you feeling? And this MP sort of sighed and said, guess I better go home and get ready for an election. And there is, this feeling for sure amongst the Conservative caucus that Mr. Carney may take Canadians to the polls this spring. And, speaking on, I'm sure for these MPs on a personal level, they're very tired. Nobody really wants to fight another election. But on a political level, the polls being what they are, support for Mr. Carney being as high as it is, support for Mr. Poilievre personally being as low as it is, the message of hope that Mr. Poilievre is sending, in which we get a glimpse of one way that he's going to try and broaden out his party's base. The other way is a campaign narrative already seeming to form, which is, what has Mr. Carney actually done for you? What change has he actually brought for you? But those two things take time to cement. They take time to hold on in the minds of voters. And I think Mr. Poilievre will be challenged, I think, as Catherine said, to just get into the conversation and start looking like someone who could replace Mr. Carney. He may have a very narrow window to do that, and it might be too hard.
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that Jason, he was full of advice, Jason Kenney, on the weekend. One of the other things that he said, Rob, was that Pierre Poilievre should look for opportunities to speak on the international stage. Not to undercut the government, but he should, give a speech about Ukraine. He should visit, the United States and help out in some way there. And I wonder, whether that would be part of the strategy, because if you've got the base on board and you've said things to make them happy, how do you get Canadians to feel reassured about him in the idea of in the world as it is now?
Yeah, take on more of that statesman approach for sure. I think that's one way. But there's just a general sort of criticism of people, of Pierre Poilievre, that haven't voted for him in the past, that he's scary and he's obnoxious. And I think the speech and what we've seen from him in the last few months, doing more interviews, attending the parliamentary, dinner, joking about himself, I think he's making the right pivot here. He has moved away from the slogans in that speech. He has talked less about broken Canada, more about a hopeful Canada. He got emotional talking about his daughter. Those are the right moves, but it does take a while for people to get that image of him chomping an apple and spitting at reporters kind of out of their mind. But you see the path for him, right? In British Columbia, he has run the board on all the rural working class ridings. He has to appeal to the urbanites who are, provincial New Democrats who are scared of him. They're worried about what he will do, including on international issues. And you're right, there is a step he can take there to lower some of that fear.
And Catherine, I guess that's an important point too, that the sort of tonal shift that we've been seeing, not only in the speech, but through action, as Rob says, through speaking to reporters more and putting himself out there a bit more.
Yeah, there are a couple things I would say, Rosie. One, on the question of international travel, it's my understanding that this is something that they've been thinking about, considering their options and when the right time might be to do something like this. But I'd say more broadly, one thing that is interesting to me is that some of these changes that we've seen in Pierre Poilievre have been things he has not wanted to do. My understanding is for a long time he was very resistant to talking about his family publicly, and you can understand, in particular, talking about your child having special needs, that is perhaps something that many people might not be comfortable putting out there in the public stage. But it's taken him some time to be willing to do that. The conversations he's had with mainstream national media outlets was not something he wanted to do in the past. So he is trying to stretch a little bit further, I think, in hopes that helps warm up some people to him. The question, of course, is whether or not it's enough. If he does go, for instance, and do some of those, some of that international travel, he will inevitably be compared, perhaps, to that Mark Carney Davos speech, right? Which was a high watermark for the Prime Minister. He then came home and, as we were discussing last hour, had some challenges in his speech about domestic issues, particularly as it relates to Quebec. And that is perhaps easier terrain for the Conservatives to be fighting and saying, well, there was a misstep there, these affordability issues. It's more comfortable ground. But he's going to have to, I think, make up some ground on that place where Mark Carney seems to have more of a hold. Pierre Poilievre has been at his best politically in terms of the numbers when he's had control of the narrative. And I mean, when it comes to foreign affairs, let's face it, Donald Trump has control of a lot of the narrative about what's happening in terms of Canada and the world right now.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Steph.
Yeah, I'll pick up on that by saying he's also, of course, challenged by the fact he's not the prime minister. That's right. He is the leader of the opposition, and there's only so much he can insert himself into the narrative because it carries with it risks. I mean, Steve Out has said to me in our conversation on the convention floor about the challenge for Mr. Poilievre is that as leader of the opposition, he is supposed to pick apart what the government is doing. He is supposed to hold them accountable. But when we're trying and talking about holding Mr. Carney accountable for how he's dealing with U.S. President Donald Trump, criticism of that can be interpreted as somebody siding with U.S. President Donald Trump, which isn't fair necessarily, but it's very dangerous for Mr. Poilievre. I do think he's going to go overseas. I believe he's booked for an engagement in the United Kingdom later this year. Whether he follows through with that, I don't know. But he is in this challenging position where, as leader of the opposition, again, he has no control. And where he's been so strong, I think I just want to underscore Catherine's point because it's an excellent one, where he's been so strong is in picking apart the domestic issues and being explicitly able to hang them on the federal government and then propose a solution to that. When the issues facing our country are external, when they demand reaction, that's a lot harder to navigate through.
Okay, I'm out of time, so sorry, Rob, but you'll get more time the next time you're on. Thanks for getting up early, everyone. Steph, safe travels home. Good to see you all. Steph Levitz, Catherine Cullen, Rob Shaw. Thanks, guys. Protests are ongoing in Minnesota and across the U.S. over the actions of federal immigration agents. A former governor has offered a different solution to de-escalate, calling on Minnesota to leave the U.S. and join Canada. I'll talk to former pro wrestler turned politician Jesse Ventura after the break. You're watching Rosemary Barton live. As anger grows over the Trump administration's deployment of ICE agents in Minnesota, the state's former governor, Jesse Ventura, is proposing a solution of his own.
How about since Trump dislikes Minnesota so bad and we're so out of control, let's join Canada.
Ventura made those comments on an episode of a Minnesota-based podcast in January, amidst the massive anti-ICE protests and calls for the agents to leave the state. ICE, as you may remember, shot and killed 2 people, Rene Good and Alex Preddy, in Minneapolis. That happened at the end of last month. So how serious is the former governor about the state joining Canada? Governor Jesse Ventura joins me live this morning. Nice to see you.
Nice to be here, Rosemary. My pleasure.
Yeah, so were you joking, Governor, or was this a real idea?
Well, I think it's a logical idea. I said it a bit tongue-in-cheek, and in fact, I've already got our name if you'd like to hear it.
Go ahead.
We could become Mini-toba.
Well, as a girl from Manitoba, I think that's a good name.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, Manitoba's right above us, and we're Minnesota, so naturally we could be Mini-toba. And be the extension of a lower Manitoba or another Manitoba state, whatever. No, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's also dead serious.
Yeah.
We're being attacked right now by our own president. And I'm going to tell you this. I call his people the Gestapo, and I'm not going to back away from it because here's why I think I'm entitled to do that. Not only am I a veteran, but my mother and father both fought against the Nazis in Germany. They're buried at Fort Snelling National Cemetery. How many people can say their mom was in North Africa against Rommel? Not too many. And my father had 6 bronze battle stars in Europe. So I think if my parents were alive today in their home of Minneapolis, they would describe these tactics as the Gestapo.
And you yourself are a Vietnam vet. I'm wondering that, you mentioned in that podcast starting a petition. Is that something you are going to do? As you said, it was a little tongue-in-cheek, but you also have you have serious concerns. So are you going to take some action in this regard?
Well, I have serious concerns because it can't go on like this. Now, I don't know how you'd leave the United States. I haven't studied what it would take and whether Canada would accept us. I don't know all that. So it was a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's trying to make the point.
Yeah.
It's trying to make the point. Minnesota would probably be better off being Canadians today. One good thing, we'd get some health care.
Have you spoken to Governor Walz? Obviously, you're the former governor. I don't know if he ever reaches out. And even if you haven't, what would be your advice for him right now, given what he's dealing with?
My advice to him, Tim Walz has had it tough.
Yeah.
During both his terms, he had the pandemic to deal with, and now he's got this to deal with. My position is hold tight, stand tough, and don't give this guy nothing. Because Donald Trump views any concession as a victory for him. And he needs to learn something, this draft-dodging coward, that Minnesota's not going to back down from him. He picked the wrong state to mess with because he's messing with Jesse the Body now. And we got some plans that I haven't said will happen yet, but he may be seeing me face to face.
Well, okay, well, I'm going to ask the question then that I was going to ask, because Tim Walz is not going to run again. Would you consider re-entry in the political arena?
I already have, but it won't be serious until you see the beard cut.
Okay, that's how we'll know. But are you actually thinking about? Yeah.
You're damn right I am, but that's the telltale sign.
Okay.
If I show up clean-shaven or with just a mustache, watch out.
Yeah, the president does seem to have, it's hard to know what the strategy is in Minnesota. He did send his border czar, Tom Homan, there to try and, I think, calm things down a little bit.
Wait a minute. Don't he look just like Sergeant Schultz?
Well, I think that's the other guy, but Tom Homan has gone in and tried to calm things down with ICE.
It ain't the other guy. Tom Homan looks, if you put him in a uniform, he'd look like Sergeant Schultz.
What do you think? What do you think the strategy is, Jesse Ventura, in terms of where the president wants to go next? Because his polling on immigration is plummeting. People are getting upset with what's happening.
His goal, this guy's goal, in my opinion, is to become the supreme leader. He's already talked about suspending elections. He don't want to leave. I'll tell you what his next move's going to be. He's going to go to the Supreme Court because he's got the 3 liars that he put on the Supreme Court. And he's going to say the Constitution meant consecutive terms. You're going to see him try to run for a 3rd term saying that, well, it meant 2 in a row. It doesn't mean having 1 in between.
Yeah.
Donald Trump wants to be a fascist dictator. And for those that don't believe me, read your history. Go to Germany and read what happened in Germany. What took place? They said the borders have to be protected. They said we're being overrun with crime. And what did they do? They singled out a group of people and they said, these are the people responsible for all your troubles.
Jesse Ventura, Jesse Ventura, as a passionate Minnesotan, let me ask you what your message is to people there as they are watching this unfold, many of them very upset. What are you saying to Minnesotans?
I say to Minnesotans, we're tough, hold the line, we'll win in the end.
What do you make of the president's saying things about the sovereignty of other places, whether it be Greenland or Canada? How serious do you think those threats are, sir?
I think with this guy, anything is serious. You know, you got to remember, the last election was really a simple one, and I blame the United States people for this too. They're getting what they deserve because the last election was simple. You had the choice of the Constitution or the criminal. And for some reason, they took the criminal. So they shouldn't be surprised at what they're getting. He's a convicted sex offender. He don't pay taxes. He's a draft dodger, wouldn't serve his country, and yet he stands out there and preaches patriotism to us.
Okay, so Jesse Ventura, I'm going to leave it there, but just confirming that you are still considering running for governor of Minnesota. That is a real consideration you're having right now.
I'm having that consideration and other considerations.
Oh, interesting. What does that mean? That you might mount a bid for president?
No, that's too far off. That's 3 years from now. I don't have no worry over that. Okay. No. Our main person is Senator Klobuchar, and she's announced she's coming back to run for governor.
Okay.
Well, somebody's got to, wait a minute. Somebody's got to replace her as a senator, don't they?
Yes. Okay, Jesse Ventura.
And would that not put me eye to eye with him?
It would do that. It would do that. Former governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura, the body, as you were known. Listen, thank you for sharing your very passionate views about what's happening in your state. We appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, Rosemary. I still got a little wrestler left in me.
Have a good Sunday.
You too.
energy, health, education, childcare, you name it, they wanted control over it. And that is where the real damage to Canada was done by Justin Trudeau and his allies. Pierre Poilievre and our Conservatives believe in our Constitution.
That's the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, at the Federal Conservative Party convention, which wrapped up last night in Calgary. It featured the Premier, who was lamenting Liberal policies, but really only talking about Justin Trudeau. She didn't mention Prime Minister Mark Carney, nor did she attack any of his policies. Smith endorsed the Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. She is a member of the party too, and pushed the idea that the Conservative Party could do more for her province and for the country than anyone else. It was a good time out in Calgary. Glad to be back here in Ottawa, though. Busy week ahead. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Rosemary Barton. See you back here next Sunday, if not before.